The soft glow of the morning light filtered through the dormitory windows, casting warm beams across the room. I stirred beneath my blanket, half aware of the sounds of my dormmates beginning to stir, footsteps, yawns, the rustle of clothes being pulled from wardrobes. "Jessica!" The sharp whisper jolted me fully awake. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the light as I turned to see Claire standing beside my bed, her face alight with excitement. "Wake up! Today's the day!" she announced, her voice still carrying the faint lilt of toddler speech. I sat up slowly, rubbing the sleep from my eyes as her words registered. Today! The last day of my punishment! My time as Jessica was finally coming to an end. "You sure?" I asked, my voice steady now, free of the toddler slips that had plagued me in the early days of the punishment. Those moments had faded by the fourth day, though Claire hadn't been so lucky. Claire nodded eagerly, her brown hair bouncing with the motion. Mom! I heard Mrs. Yomi say it last night. You get to be you again." Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I couldn't help but smile. "Thanks, Clara," I said, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. She grinned, her excitement practically vibrating off her. "You not even a little bit nervous?" she asked, tilting her head. "A little," I admitted, smoothing out my nightgown as I stood. "But mostly, I'm ready." Clara giggled. "Good, 'cause I'm ready for you to be you again too." I laughed softly, reaching over to ruffle her hair. "Come on, let's get ready." She nodded, skipping back to her own bed to grab her uniform while I opened my wardrobe. As I pulled out the jumper uniform I'd grown so used to, a strange feeling washed over me. Relief, yes, but also a small flicker of something else. It wasn't like I'd missed being Jessica, exactly, but this time had changed me. I'd learned things about myself, about Clara, and even about Emma that I hadn't understood before. I glanced over at Clara, who was humming softly as she tugged on her tights, her speech still occasionally slipping into toddler talk. For all her grumbles and schemes, she'd been my rock through this whole mess. And now, as we prepared for what would hopefully be the last day of this punishment, I couldn't help but feel grateful. I gathered my things for the shower, tucking a towel and my uniform under one arm. The dormitory buzzed quietly with the sounds of other girls getting ready, but my focus was on the day ahead, the last day of my punishment. I was almost to the door when Emma stepped in front of me, her expression unusually serious. "Jessica," she said softly, stopping me in my tracks. I blinked at her, surprised by the interruption. "Yeah?" Emma shifted her weight, glancing down at the floor for a moment before meeting my eyes. "Are you really ready for this? For, being done with the punishment, I mean?" Her question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, her fingers brushing her skirt. "I don't know," she said, her voice quieter now. "You've been Jessica for, what, 2 weeks? Doesn't it feel weird, knowing that it's just going to be over? Like, none of it happened?" I frowned, clutching my things a little tighter. "It's not like none of it happened," I said slowly. "It's just, time to move on, you know?" Emma nodded, but her expression was thoughtful. "Yeah, I guess. It's just, I stopped sucking my thumb 2 days ago, and even now, it still feels like part of me is waiting for it to come back. Like, even when something's over, it doesn't just go away." I studied her for a moment, understanding flickering through me. She wasn't just talking about herself. She was talking about me too, about the changes I'd been through and the lessons we'd both learned. "It's not gonna be the same," I admitted, my voice softening. "Even when I'm back to being Nolan, I'm not gonna forget any of this. I can't." Emma smiled faintly at that, her expression lighter now. "Good. Because I don't think I can forget it either." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of connection between us. For all the teasing and rivalry, we'd both come out of this punishment a little different, and maybe, just maybe, a little better. "Well," Emma said, stepping aside with a smirk, "you'd better get to that shower. Can't have you looking like a mess on your big day." I laughed softly, rolling my eyes. "Thanks, Emma." She shrugged, but her smile lingered as she walked back toward her bunk. As I headed to the showers, I couldn't help but feel that this conversation, like the punishment itself, was another step towards something new, something better. The dining hall was alive with its usual morning energy, students chatting over breakfast, the clinking of plates and cutlery echoing off the high ceilings. Clara and I made our way to our usual table, her animated voice filling the air as she talked about her project for class. "So, I'm gonna make a white-up broom," Clara said, her voice tinged with lingering toddler speech, though her enthusiasm shone through. "It's not for fleeing, but it'll glow different colors when you touch it." "That's actually pretty cool," I said, smiling. "Think you'll finish it in time?" Clara puffed out her chest proudly. "Course! Already got the white SPUWs figured out." Emma joined us just as we sat down, holding her breakfast tray with one hand and gesturing with the other. "Mine's a miniature spellbook," she announced, plopping down across from us. "It only does one spell, levitation, but it's tiny, so you can carry it in your pocket." Clara tilted her head, curious. "That sounds neat, but, why tiny?" Emma grinned. "Because it's fun! And, you know, easier to show off." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "You two are gonna make the rest of the class jealous." Before the conversation could go further, the dining hall grew quieter, and I felt a familiar presence behind me. Turning, I saw Professor Ashtorn standing just a few feet away, her sharp gaze fixed on me. "Jessica," she said, her tone calm but firm. "Come with me." My stomach flipped, but I nodded quickly. "Oh, okay." As I stood, I hesitated for a moment before turning back to her. "Can Clara and Emma come too?" I asked, glancing at my friends. Professor Ashtorn raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought she might say no, but then she gave a small nod. "If they wish to join, they may." Clara perked up immediately, grabbing her toast. "I'm coming." Emma looked a little more hesitant but stood as well, curiosity evident in her eyes. "Yeah, okay! Let's go!" Together, the three of us followed Professor Ashtorn out of the dining hall, the chatter of our classmates fading behind us. I couldn't help but wonder what awaited us, and why Professor Ashtorn had allowed Clara and Emma to join me for this final meeting. Professor Ashtorn led us to her office, the familiar shelves of ancient books and magical artifacts casting long shadows in the dim light. Clara and Emma exchanged curious glances as we entered, but I couldn't look away from the bag sitting on her desk, a simple, nondescript satchel that seemed to hold more weight than it should. She picked it up and handed it to me. The fabric felt cool against my fingers, and I already knew what was inside before she spoke. "It's time, Jessica," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Time to become Nolan again." My heart raced as I held the bag. The thought of returning to my true self after 2 long weeks as Jessica was overwhelming, but as I stood there, another thought crept in, one I hadn't expected. "Wait," I said, glancing up at her. What happens if Nolan wants to be a girl again? Like, for a weekend or something?" Professor Ashtorn raised an eyebrow, her sharp gaze studying me closely. I felt Clara and Emma's eyes on me too, but I couldn't bring myself to look at them. After a moment, she nodded, her expression softening slightly. "I wondered if you might ask that," she said. With a flick of her wand, 2 small bottles appeared in her hand, their glass shimmering faintly in the light. She handed them to me. One was filled with a soft, pink liquid, and the other with a deep, royal blue. "These," she said, her voice steady, "will allow you to change your form at will. The pink will transform you into a girl, and the blue will return you to a boy. Each bottle will refill automatically, but there are rules." I stared at the bottles, my mind racing. "Rules?" Professor Ashtorn nodded. "First, these transformations are not to be used frivolously. They are tools for self-discovery and understanding, not for evading responsibility or creating chaos." She gave me a pointed look, and I nodded quickly. "Second," she continued, "you may not use them during school hours unless you have expressed permission from a teacher. These transformations can cause confusion and disruption if not handled properly. I swallowed hard, nodding again. And third, she said, her tone softening slightly, remember that your true self, who you are inside, does not depend on the form you wear. These bottles are merely a means to explore, not to define. I clutched the bottles tightly, their weight both literal and symbolic. Thank you, I said softly. Professor Ashtorn gave a small nod. You've come a long way, Jessica, or should I say, Nolan. I trust you'll use these wisely. I glanced at Clara and Emma. Clara was grinning, her excitement barely contained. That's so cool! She said. Emma crossed her arms, smirking slightly. Guess you've got options now, huh? I laughed nervously, feeling the enormity of the choice ahead. Now, Professor Ashtorn said, her voice returning to its usual firmness. It's time for you to decide. If you're ready, use the blue bottle to return to your true self. I stared at the bottle, its deep blue liquid shimmering faintly in the light. For a moment, I hesitated, but then I took a deep breath, uncorked it, and drank. The transformation was quick, the familiar tingling sensation washing over me as my body shifted back to its original form. Within moments, I was Nolan again, the jumper uniform feeling loose and awkward on my broader frame. Professor Ashtorn handed me the bag with my boy's uniform. Change quickly! Your classmates will be expecting you. I nodded, clutching the bottles tightly as I stepped toward the side room to change. As I walked, I couldn't help but glance down at the pink bottle in my hand, its soft glow a quiet reminder of the choice I now had, and the possibilities it held. Standing in the side room, I glanced down at the girl's jumper uniform I was still wearing. The pleated skirt swayed slightly as I moved, the soft fabric familiar now after 2 weeks of wearing it every day. I ran my fingers over the smooth material, realizing that it didn't feel as strange as it once had. I wasn't sure when it had happened, but somewhere along the way, I'd grown used to it. The idea of walking back into the classroom wearing it didn't seem as terrifying as it might have at the start of the punishment. But that wasn't who I was, not today. Taking a deep breath, I unzipped the back of the jumper and slipped it off, folding it neatly and setting it aside. For the first time in 2 weeks, I pulled on a pair of pants, the crisp fabric cool against my legs. I buttoned up the white shirt from the bag and tucked it in, feeling the fit settle around me like an old friend. The blazer followed, its weight familiar and grounding. By the time I laced up my shoes, I felt like myself again, or at least, like the version of myself I was still rediscovering. I looked at my reflection in the small mirror on the wall. There was Nolan, short hair, neatly dressed in the boy's uniform. But there was something different in my eyes, something I hadn't seen before. Stepping back out into Professor Ashtorn's office, I found her waiting, along with Clara and Emma. Clara's face lit up the moment she saw me, her excitement practically bouncing off the walls. "They fit good!" Clara exclaimed, grinning. "Bet it feel weird wearing pants again, huh?" Emma smirked, crossing her arms. "Bet he's been dreaming about it!" I chuckled softly, shaking my head. "Actually," I said, glancing down at my uniform, "it does feel a little weird. But, it's nice." Professor Ashtorn studied me for a moment, her sharp gaze softening slightly. "You've grown during this punishment, Nolan," she said. "In more ways than one. I hope you'll carry what you've learned with you." I nodded, clutching the bottles in my pocket tightly. "I will," I said quietly. As we stepped out of her office and into the hallway, the cool air brushing against my legs felt strange, but good. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was stepping forward into something new. And this time, I was ready.